On the day before Memorial Day in 2009, 5-year-old Nevaeh Amyah Buchanan was hanging out with friends at the Charlotte Arms Apartments, where she lived with her mother, Jennifer Buchanan, and grandmother, Sherry Buchanan. Her name was heaven spelled backward, and Jennifer said her daughter was always a little bit of heaven to her. Navea had spent the day with her mom at their apartment, and that afternoon they went to a local Kmart to do some shopping. Around 6 that evening, Navea told her mom she was going to play with her friend Austin, who lived in the apartment above them. Around 6:30, Jennifer began looking for her outside, but she could not find her anywhere. She started knocking on doors at the apartment complex, but no one had seen Navea. By 8 o'clock, Jennifer called 911 to report Navea missing. Police began a massive search that evening for Navea using K-9 units and helicopters. Over the next few days, police knocked on the doors of every single apartment in the complex. There were 180 units, and at some point, police actually searched every single one of them. No one had seen Navea. Just after midnight, on the evening she went missing, an Amber Alert was issued for Navea, but there were still no signs of her anywhere. She had disappeared into the night.
Despite massive searches by police officers and hundreds of concerned citizens, they still couldn't find Navea.
This went on for a week, 8 days, 9 days, 10 days. Still no signs of Navea. She would eventually be found, but it wasn't the end result anyone was hoping for. And to make matters worse, this case remains unsolved to this day. This is Twisted Crimes.
May 24, 2009 was a beautiful spring day in Monroe, Michigan. It hit 72 degrees that afternoon. After a long cold winter, the kids who lived at the Charlotte Arms apartment complex were taking full advantage of being able to play outside again. Monroe is in the southeastern part of Michigan. It's about a 40-minute drive south of Detroit and less than a 20-minute drive to the Ohio border. Around 6 that evening, 5-year-old Nevaeh Buchanan had just changed her clothes after having an accident. Although she was potty trained, she tended to wait until she really had to go before using the bathroom, and this time, she had waited a bit too long. She was now wearing a baby blue red and white striped shirt with a V-neck, white collar along with jeans that went to her knees. She was 3 feet 10 inches tall with brown hair, brown eyes, and weighed around 45 pounds. She walked barefoot on the old brown stained carpet of the living room of their rundown 2-bedroom apartment and said to her mom, Jennifer, "Mom, I'm going upstairs to Austin's house to play a game."
Austin Kuhn was an 8-year-old who also lived in the apartment complex where Navea lived. They hung out pretty much every day. Jennifer was sitting on her brown couch, watching John and Kate Plus 8 reruns on TV, and didn't even hardly look up at her before telling her she could go. According to the Detroit Free Press, a short time later, a little girl who lived at the apartment complex, who Jennifer would later describe as a tattletale, saw Navea riding her scooter in the road. The girl knew Navea was not allowed to do that, so she went to tell Jennifer about it. Jennifer said although the little girl had said Navea was riding in the road, what she actually meant was she was riding in the parking lot of the apartment complex. She said the kids often referred to that as the road. Jennifer told the newspaper that she was angry. She said her plan was to go find Navea and get onto her for messing around in the parking lot. She was not going to spank her. She said she didn't do spankings and described herself as a timeout mom. It took Jennifer a little while to get up from watching TV. Then she had to find her flip-flops to put on. As she was looking for them, another little girl showed up and asked if Navea was home. She told the little girl Navea was either with Austin or out back or out front. Eventually, Jennifer found her flip-flops and headed outside. She looked around behind the apartment complex in the parking lot area, but didn't see Navea. Then she looked at a sandbox she liked to play in. No signs of her there either, so she checked out the playground of a school located close behind the complex. At the time, there was a hole in the fence around the playground so kids from the apartments could slip in easily to play here, but she didn't see Navea or her scooter. At this point, Jennifer figured Navea must have gone to a friend's apartment, so she says she spent about 45 minutes knocking on apartment doors. No one had seen Navea since around 6:30 that evening. She said around this time she went to tell the apartment manager Navea was missing. After that, she walked around the complex and saw Navea's purple and blue scooter behind the building. At that point, she called 911. When she got done talking to them, she called her mom Sherry, who was at work. Sherry raced home, running red lights and actually beating the police to the apartment complex. Shortly after that, the search began for Nevaeh.
Hundreds of law enforcement agents as well as volunteers from the community began searching for her. A task force was formed with more than 100 local law enforcement agents as well as federal and state agents. During interviews with residents of the apartment complex, investigators talked to a resident who was able to confirm the timeline Jennifer had given police. She said she stepped out onto her balcony around 6 p.m. and saw Nevaeh playing with a couple of her friends and riding her scooter. She said she came back out a bit later and no longer saw Nevaeh, but did see her scooter beside the building. A little while later, she heard Jennifer yelling for her daughter. A man by the name of Tim Finley came to visit his sister at the complex that day. He said he left around 7 p.m. and didn't see any children playing in the parking lot. But he did see a little red car speed off from the back of the complex. Investigators also spoke with two of Nevaeh's young friends, a 6-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy. The girl told them she saw Nevaeh walk into the woods and meet up with a man she called Daddy George.
The boy told them Nevaeh had been kidnapped. He said a bad man stabbed Nevaeh with a knife. He also said he tried to help Nevaeh, but he couldn't. A police report obtained by WTOL 11 News stated that the boy couldn't really make it clear that he actually saw the events, possibly due to his developmental level or trauma. Before we move on with the story, let's go back a little bit to 2006. Nevaeh would have turned 2 on February 3rd of that year. It was also around that time when her father, a man by the name of Shane Inohosa, admits he saw his daughter for the final time. Shane was just 17 years old when Nevaeh was born, while Jennifer was 19. Things didn't work out for them, so he moved to Ohio. He never bothered to show up and visit with his daughter or take her out to lunch or anything. He was not even paying child support. However, according to comments he made to NBC 24 News, he did try to get custody of her at some point in time. He said, "I'm sick. I don't want to believe that she, Jennifer, had something to do with it. But I think if she did, she deserves what she gets. She needs to spend time in jail. And this would never have happened if Nevaeh were in my custody a long time ago."
In 2002, Jennifer was arrested for retail fraud and larceny. She ended up pleading guilty to the fraud charge and was sentenced to 30 days in jail. In 2006, she was using various drugs. We're not sure if she had a job at the time or not, but whatever she was doing, apparently she didn't have enough money to support her drug habit. So she figured out another way to get some money. She started breaking into houses and stealing things to buy her drugs. Eventually, she was caught and found guilty of first-degree home invasion, which is a felony. She spent 11 months in jail and she lost custody of Navea. However, it doesn't seem that Shane rushed back to town to take care of his daughter at that time because Jennifer's mother, Sherry, got custody of Navea. Jennifer said, "Dreaming of spending time with my daughter again is what kept me going while I was in jail," saying, quote, "I mostly thought about my daughter. She was the one that helped me turn around. I cherished every moment that I was with her," end quote.
Despite the fact she claimed Nevaeh helped her turn her life around, Jennifer still had not gotten custody back from her mother 3 years later when Nevaeh disappeared, which was part of the reason why Jennifer was still living with her mother at the apartment complex. Jennifer is apparently still having difficulty turning her life around to this day. We have obtained never-before-released body cam footage of her recent arrest for domestic violence, which happened the day after her husband caught her in bed with another man in late October of 2023.
It's not easy for me to say. However, he come in here last night and he found another guy here.
Okay.
That's where it all started.
Okay.
And of course, he wants me to go. I have nowhere to go. But we're married and he knows that he can't exactly put me out like
Like force you to leave.
Yeah, force me to leave.
Yeah.
And this is how it all started.
Okay. Did anything get physical?
No?
Nobody pushed, nobody shoved, scratched, nothing.
She hit me in my wrist with a fireplace poker to knock my phone out of my hand so I couldn't call the cops.
Okay.
And then she took my phone and she threw it out in the backyard. And then I went over to the neighbors and I had them call for me. She hit me in the wrist with a fireplace poker. She's been chasing me around the house with a fireplace poker.
Did she punch you in the face? How did you get that mark on your face?
She threw me in the bathtub several times, and then she threw me up against the bathroom door.
Point anything got physical?
No.
Nobody ever struck anyone with a poker? Were you ever carrying one?
No.
Okay. No blows, nothing like that?
No.
Okay. Well, right now you're going to be placed under arrest for domestic violence, okay?
No.
He's got some injuries on him.
Mom, they're gonna take me to jail, I guess. I don't know for what. He said domestic
I can put it on.
violence.
I can put it on speaker.
Transfer your back for me.
So it's just gonna be domestic violence. He has clear injuries on him. Okay.
I didn't touch him, sir.
She was also arrested in May of 2023.
I've had her arrested before
Okay.
for assault with intent to murder.
On you?
Yes. She came at me. That's what those marks are on that wall. She came at me with an axe.
Oh, that's not good.
We'll show more of the body cam footage later in this video. Sometime around 2007, Jennifer was on parole after she got out of jail after serving time for the home invasion. It was at the parole office where she met a man by the name of George Kennedy, who was also on parole. George was a good bit older than Jennifer. He was around 37 at the time they met, while Jennifer was about 22. Jennifer has admitted that she did talk to George about why he was on parole and found out he had assaulted a 14-year-old girl behind a gas station in 1998. He was convicted of fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct as well as home invasion. So perhaps George and Jennifer felt they had a special connection because they both had been convicted of home invasions in the past. What a fun story for Jennifer to tell her grandkids about one day if they would have gotten married. Where'd you and Granddad meet? Oh, you're never going to believe it. Your grandfather and I had so much in common. George was sentenced to 2 to 15 years in prison. He served about 5 years before being released in July of 2007. George and Jennifer did hit it off and started dating, despite the fact George was on parole at the time. As part of the agreement for his parole, he was not allowed to be around any child under the age of 17 unless another adult was present as well. He also was not allowed to have a romantic relationship with someone who had a child. Plus, he could not have any kids' games, toys, or children's clothing, and he could not be within 1,000 feet of any school, park, arcade, pool, daycare center, or playground. Obviously, he was not too concerned about the parole agreement because he was breaking a bunch of the rules by dating Jennifer and hanging around Navea. As for Jennifer, she said she was the type of person who thought everyone deserves a second chance. Jennifer said Navea loved George and looked up to him as a father figure. She would even call him Daddy George. So investigators have the 6-year-old witness telling them Daddy George was in the woods and took Navea. Then they find out about George Kennedy. So of course, they want to find him as quickly as possible. The day after Navea disappeared, police did find Kennedy staying at this Motel 7 nearby. According to the search warrant obtained by WTOL 11 News, inside the room they found 3 tiny motorcycles made of metal with bright paint and shiny wheels. Navea was a tomboy who loved motorcycles and trucks. Also in the room, police found a towel and shorts with blood on them. In the bathroom, they noticed blood stains on the wall above the sink. Detectives also searched the van Kennedy was driving at the time. Inside it, they found a JVC radio face case that contained a silver multi-tool, which appeared to have blood on the exterior. When they examined the blood, they determined it was human blood. They also found pictures of a little girl who looked eerily similar to Navea, as well as pictures of other young girls. Kennedy agreed to take a lie detector test, which he failed.
When investigators ran the plate on the van, they found out it did not actually belong to George Kennedy. It belonged to a man by the name of Roy Lee Smith. Kennedy told them Smith was a friend of his. Smith's mom, Donna Smith, said her son had decided to make a trade with Kennedy about a week and a half ago, where her son got Kennedy's van in exchange for Smith's Thunderbird. When investigators ran Smith's record, they found out he had assaulted a woman twice on May 12, 1991. He ended up serving 15 years in prison for various sexual misconduct charges, as well as several counts of larceny. He got out of prison in February of 2008, and he was not allowed to be around children as part of his parole agreement. But he too broke his parole agreement by spending time with Navea. Jennifer said, "As for Roy, I only knew him for a couple of months, because he knew George, and they had some kind of classes together. I figured Roy had the same offense against him."
So if you figure they're both sex offenders, why are you dating one of them and hanging out with the other one? And why are you allowing your 5-year-old daughter to be around them? Because the problem here is sex offenders don't just magically get better by taking some classes. According to SMART, which stands for Office of Sex Offender Sentencing, Monitoring, Apprehending, Registering, and Tracking, recidivism rates are typically based on officially recorded information, such as an arrest, criminal conviction, or incarceration. Because these official statistics reflect only offenses that come to the attention of authorities, they are a diluted measure of reoffending. Research has clearly demonstrated that many sex offenses are never reported to authorities. For example, a 1998 study found that only about 1 in 4 sexual assaults were reported to police. More recently, a 2006 study found that only 19% of women and 13% of men who were assaulted since their 18th birthday actually reported the assault to the police. Several studies of victims have shown that the likelihood that a sexual assault will be reported to law enforcement decreases with the victim's age. A study done by the University of Toronto took a look at not only sex offenders who reoffended and were arrested again, which some studies have estimated to be around 37%, but also the study examined hospital records, checking for the criminal history of offenders, as well as cases where charges were reduced because of a guilty plea to a lesser charge. That study found the true recidivism rate among sex offenders to be 88.3%, a truly insane figure.
Florida State Senator Lauren Book, who is also the founder of Lauren's Kids for Victims of Child Abuse, said, quote, "In so many instances, these individuals should never ever be allowed out for a second chance. They're ticking time bombs. It's not a question of if they reoffend, it's a question of when they reoffend." End quote. So, some people suggest these offenders should never ever get a second chance at freedom, but Jennifer felt they deserved a second chance. She felt so strongly about it, she allowed her daughter to look up to George as a father figure, and allowed her to hang out with Roy Smith as well.
Both Kennedy and Smith were arrested on Memorial Day, the day after Navea went missing, for violating their parole by being around Navea. They both denied having anything to do with her disappearance. Also on Memorial Day, there were hundreds of people from the community who decided to hold off on their holiday cookouts and family gatherings to instead help search for Navea. Jennifer had already told police Navea was scared of strangers and would not have wandered off with one without yelling and screaming loud enough where someone in the complex would have heard her shouts. She felt it had to be someone she knew. The FBI and Michigan State Police were heavily involved in the search by this point. Despite not seeing his daughter in all those years, Shane drove up from Toledo, Ohio, and set up a tent to live in at the apartment complex. He told reporters he was not planning to leave until his daughter was found. He was actually risking being arrested by showing up, since he had not been paying any child support. On Tuesday, the day after Memorial Day, Jennifer agreed to take a polygraph test. When it was over, she told reporters she had failed one of the questions. She said it was because of a lack of sleep and because she did not want to be there.
Quote, "I wanted to be out there trying to find my daughter. I understand they have to look at me, but I don't know where she is." End quote. Kennedy and Smith were each named persons of interest in the case. When asked if Jennifer was also a person of interest, Tillman Crutchfield, who was a Monroe County sheriff at the time, replied, "No comment." Also on Tuesday, hundreds of volunteers from the community met at Kmart and continued to search for Navea throughout Monroe County, while Jennifer was questioned by investigators for several hours. On Wednesday, 2 quarries were searched by divers, but Navea was still not found. On Friday, police got some news, which must have come as a huge surprise. The blood found on various items owned by George Kennedy and in his motel room was not a match for Nevaeh. On Saturday, there was a candlelight vigil held for Nevaeh at her apartment complex. Hundreds of people came to show their support. By this point in time, national media outlets and shows, including Nancy Grace and America's Most Wanted, were talking about the case.
According to the Detroit Free Press, one beautiful Sunday afternoon in the 1990s, a man by the name of James Easter headed to a local library and removed all of his clothes. He said, "It was kind of a warm day. I took my clothes off for a little sunshine. 2 boys came with their dog, and I never did see them. That was a mistake. I just felt I wanted to get a little warm and a little suntan." On Sunday, May 31st, 2009, 2 FBI agents stopped by James's home, telling him they wanted to talk about Nevaeh's case. He was 64 years old at the time. With James' permission, they looked all around his house. Then they took him to the station for an interrogation that ended up lasting around 12 hours. Apparently, police had reason to believe that James had been seen at the Kmart at the same time Jennifer and Nevaeh were there on the day she disappeared. Also, James's girlfriend at the time, Janie Austin, lived in the same building at the Charlotte Arms Apartments where Jennifer and Nevaeh lived, so he knew the area very well.
Janie told the Detroit Free Press that she may have been the last adult, besides the one who grabbed her, to see Nevaeh that night. She said, quote, "It was 5 or 6 o'clock. I just saw her go by with the little boy behind her on the scooter. She was riding by like a wonderful little child." End quote. The FBI agents accused Easter of following Jennifer and Nevaeh back to their apartment complex after leaving Kmart. They questioned him about where he was on different days and times leading up to Nevaeh's disappearance. He told them that he had receipts that would prove where he was at those times. They went back to his house, he showed them the receipts, and the agents left.
Just a few minutes later, James headed out to the backyard and started up a fire. He told the Detroit Free Press he was burning receipts, TV dinners, and a sex toy. He said he was burning the sex toy because he felt shame about having it and said, "I've had it a little too long. I might as well get rid of it." He walked back into the house, heard his dogs barking, looked out the blinds, didn't see anything, then opened a door when suddenly multiple officers were there screaming at him to get down. He was taken to the jail. Police got a search warrant for his house where they found bloodstains on a quilt as well as behind a sink and outside his bathroom. He would later say he had no idea where the bloodstains came from. They dusted for fingerprints, took fiber samples from furniture and carpet, removed multiple boxes of X-rated videos, several Barbie dolls, gloves from a red trash can, a roll of duct tape, and the now partially burned sex toy. During questioning at the police station, one of the FBI agents asked him what he thought happened to Nevaeh. According to the Detroit Free Press, he responded with a long, elaborate answer. "If I was a bad guy and I was looking for something like a little girl or a little child, I would have drove my pickup in there. I would have made a horseshoe around the office and the pool." He said he then would have stopped on the street and turned on his hazard lights so it would seem like he had a problem with his truck. Then he would have snuck up along the blind side of those pine trees, walked clear to where she had been. That's a long ways to go. You have to go past the dumpsters. Then there's an opening before you get to the street. There were always maintenance people hanging around there. He told a slightly different story to a Detroit News reporter in June of 2009 when he said he would have took my vehicle behind the nail salon nearby and called to her with a Kit Kat. Despite failing a polygraph test, he was released after 3 days of questioning. On the morning of June 4th, 2009, Lowell Bickley and his son Guy decided to spend some father-son time together fishing along the River Raisin. They found a great spot with 2 rocks they could sit on while they fished. Guy noticed there was some concrete on the ground. He told the Newport News, "I was literally sitting on the rocks to the south of it, and my feet were actually right on the concrete. In doing so, I was cracking it up with my feet right in the middle where there was a high spot. For a few hours, they sat here and fished."
They were fishing right in this area here when they began to smell something foul. They weren't sure what it was. They walked up and down the embankment trying to see where the smell was coming from and realized it was only coming from this area right here.
Around this time, Guy noticed flies were starting to show up, he said. And these blowflies or maggot flies started coming around. It was warming up and it started to smell more. Next thing I look, and these flies are all over my arms. At that point, he noticed the concrete beneath his feet had started to crack even more. He said, I took my foot and pushed on the concrete and it went down and came right back up when I pressed on it. I took the toe of my work boot and pushed some of the concrete aside and there was skin. It was maybe 8 by 8 or 6 by 6 inches and I just knew it was skin. It wasn't a dog or a cat, it was human skin. I told my dad we need to pack up and go to the truck. We went back up to the truck and called 911. They had found Nevaeh. At the site, according to the Nancy Grace Show, police also found a pair of latex gloves and an empty 90-pound bag of quick-dry concrete. Other reports said a cigarette butt was also found. Actually buried with her body was an empty Busch beer can. Her body was taken to the Wayne County Medical Examiner's office for an autopsy. WTOL 11 News obtained the autopsy report, which was written by Dr. Carl Schmidt. The report states her body was discovered face down, with concrete poured over her. She was choked to death on dirt. Dr. Schmidt closed out the report saying, whether this resulted from another person forcibly pressing this child's face into dirt or whether she was buried alive cannot be determined. You choked her to death while you were putting cement over her. Ready-mix cement. You choked her to death to hold her in there. Those were the words of James Easter when he spoke to a Detroit Free Press reporter about a year after the murder. Without any prompting from the reporter, he had started acting like he was talking to the killer. A split second later, he began talking about what may have happened the day the killer had taken Nevaeh to the banks of the River Raisin. Man, visualize yourself on your knees at the edge of the river and this little girl. And you already have the hole dug and now you are holding her in there. Now what do you got? You got a pail here where you knocked over and you scooped the rest over. Maybe, it's possible you could have done it by yourself and your hands are in there holding her down while she is struggling and her legs are kicking up and pretty soon she finally suffocates. He then raised his arms in the air and leaned over his bed. He was showing the reporter what movements Nevaeh's killer may have been making at that moment. Now, you embed her legs and curl up her body, whatever way you do. Put some more concrete. Maybe you have a second bag and you get some water from the river and start mixing some more and put it. He was well equipped. He or she or both of them knew what they were going to do. We've been studying and following this case for quite some time now, and we've never once thought in great detail of what may have happened on the banks of the river that day. This guy is imagining this murder in tremendous detail. Very strange, to say the least.
According to Fox 2 Detroit, police were actually able to trace where that Busch beer can that was buried with Nevaeh was purchased. The can was traced back to this store, which was called Highlight Supermarket at the time. Now it's a Fresh Market. The most interesting thing about this is that Roy Lee Smith lived in this house here at the time. The address of this house is 15501 South Telegraph Road in Monroe. The supermarket is located right down the road at 15290 South Telegraph Road, just a short walk from the Smith's house. The supermarket is also less than a mile from the Motel 7 where Daddy George was staying at the time.
Police were also trying to figure out where that 90-pound bag of concrete came from. There's no reporting on whether they ever figured that out. We reached out to current Sheriff Troy Goodnaw and asked him several questions about the case. We got a response from Under Sheriff Jeff Pauley saying, "This case is very much an active criminal investigation. It is a matter of policy to not discuss the case with non-law enforcement officials," which is of course a dumb policy in our opinion. It's crazy how these investigators, not just in this case, but in so many cases, hide behind the fact it's an active investigation. But it's been almost 15 years, and you guys have not solved it. Release some information and let the public help. 90-pound bags of concrete are not sold at many places in Monroe. However, one place that does sell them is Coleman Concrete Company, which happens to be located right behind the Motel 7 where Daddy George was staying. There are reports that there was a break-in at Coleman Concrete shortly before Nevaeh was murdered. Workers arrived one morning to find part of the chain-link fence cut. There are no reports about whether anything was stolen in that incident. 11 Investigates took a look at Nevaeh's case in 2021. During their investigation, they found out that on May 23, 2009, here at the Greenwich Commons apartment complex, a man was standing near a dumpster when two kids walked by. The man exposed himself to the kids. This is just a little more than 3 miles from Charlotte Arms. The man was driving a black Grand Prix and he was later arrested in the case. The interesting thing here is that a witness at Charlotte Arms told 11 Investigates that Nevaeh was messing around with the tires on a black car, trying to let the air out of them the day before she went missing. The car was one the witness had never seen before. She said the car remained at the complex that one night, then it was gone around the time Nevaeh disappeared. When investigators were looking into the exposure incident here at Greenwich Commons, they went to visit the suspect's parents. His parents told police that their son would always take a shower after he woke up in the morning, then he would head out and not come back home until late in the evening. They said he loved to fish at different random places around Monroe, he drove a black car, and to top all that off, he was friends with Roy Lee Smith. 11 Investigates passed this information along to the police. Police then interviewed the witness from Charlotte Arms. We are not sure what they did with the information from there. According to the latest record we could find, George Kennedy was released from prison on July 8th of 2020. According to the Michigan Sex Offender website, Roy Lee Smith is in compliance, out of prison, and still living in Monroe, Michigan. James Easter has a Facebook page with one friend. However, he has not posted anything publicly since 2018. No one has ever been charged in this case. However, according to the True Crime Garage podcast, police do have a number one suspect in the case. This man is currently serving a lengthy prison sentence for a different crime. At the time of the podcast, they reported the man was facing further charges for trying to murder a fellow inmate. They say this guy acted impulsively and this was a rare case of stranger abduction. He apparently has no connection with anyone in the case. As for Jennifer Buchanan, she ended up getting married to a man by the name of Shane Antrim, which is interesting since Shane was also the name of Nevaeh's father. They have 2 boys together who are now around the age Nevaeh was when she was killed. They are apparently separated now as they are no longer friends on Facebook. October 20th of 2023 is when Shane came home to the trailer he and Jennifer shared together and found another man in his bed with his wife. Jennifer left the trailer with the man, but she returned the next day and started fighting with Shane, who eventually had a neighbor call the police.
What's going on?
I honestly don't know. Well, I don't know what he had called and said, but like, we're not getting along.
68 amount.
We're not getting along over, personal.
Can you take your hand out of your pocket for me? Thanks.
Sorry, it's a habit. We're not
No, you're
getting
good.
along over personal situations.
Yeah.
And, he's drinking and everything. He threatened to suspend my phone, so all I have is just in my pocket. So from there, he ran over to the neighbor and had the neighbor call you guys. And my mom was just here. Excuse me. My mom was just here with our kids. I gave them a bath, sent them right back home with my mom. My mom did not even make it home before he,
Yeah, where's he right now?
inside the house somewhere. So I figured I'd come outside and wait because he'd come back and he said that he had the neighbor call you guys. So I figured I'd stay outside and wait.
I appreciate that. What's your first name?
Jennifer.
What's your
I'm
last?
tired of every time we have an argument, he wants to call you guys.
Well, I get it. Jennifer, what's your last name?
Antrim.
Antrim. So basically, are you guys married?
Yes, we're
Okay.
married.
So you're married. Are you guys going through marriage issues and that's causing?
Yes.
So run me through today how you guys started arguing.
Okay. It's not easy for me to say. However, he come in here last night and he found another guy here.
Okay.
That's where it all started. But knowing that I have nowhere to go, our kids aren't coming back here. They're with my mom, because I know, I just know.
So you guys
I don't want them around it.
Yeah. So you guys were arguing today. You sent the kids with your mom. So kids are with your mom right now. You guys, has it been like you guys have been arguing about it all day?
Yeah, all day.
So then you, what prompted him to run over there and call 911?
Because I have his phone in my pocket. Because he said that he was going to suspend my phone, and I said,
Gotcha.
I don't need you.
He's gonna be inside if you want to go talk to him.
I said, I don't need you to suspend my phone and me have no contact
And he
with
wants
my
to,
children and my mom, my family, nothing.
And he wants to suspend your phone just because of what's going on.
Well, yes,
Okay.
just because of what's going on.
Okay. So.
My mom said that I could come there for the night.
Yeah.
And then try to figure it out tomorrow.
So basically, you guys are arguing, and he runs over there and asks to call 911.
Yes.
What? Did anything get physical?
No.
Nobody pushed, nobody shoved, scratched, nothing.
Did she come back today?
Yeah.
Okay, she came back like earlier this evening. She came back this morning.
She came back last night and took my debit card out of my wallet and went to ATM and withdrew $40.
Last night she did? Okay.
Whatever.
Is that torn shirt from her?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happened?
And this is from her.
In regards to the assault tonight, what happened? Like, what led up to it? Did she push you, scratch you, bite you, punch you?
She hit me on my wrist with a fireplace poker to knock my phone out of my hand so I couldn't call the cops.
Okay.
And then she took my phone and she threw it out in the backyard. And then I went over to the neighbors and I had them call for me.
We have to go off of what you say, he says, and what our complainant says. And right now, I feel like we have probable cause.
What am I going
that
to do about
some
my
kind of
job
assault
and my
occurred.
kids?
You'll be released in the morning. You're not going to be in there
On a
forever.
Saturday?
Yeah, you'll get arraigned in the morning with a magistrate.
Sir,
Yes.
I was just out there for an hour and a half or more while the kids took a bath and everything. By about 5 minutes after I had left, that's when she called me and said that he was calling you guys.
Did he have any injuries on him when you were here?
No, he didn't have nothing on him at all.
In that 5 minutes, then he somehow got some pretty good injuries.
Well, then he did it himself. He did it himself, not her.
Trust me, I understand where you're coming from, but the state of Michigan's pretty clear. We have to separate them, and they're in the state of Michigan. We're a must-arrest state for domestic violence, so we can't just.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, tell her to call me in the morning.
We'll do.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Alrighty. Deputy Pitson's going to get you down to the jail. Okay. We'll type up a report. I'll go to the prosecutor. You'll see a magistrate in the morning, and then most likely he'll just be released. Okay. But you gotta take the ride tonight. Okay.
Alright, we'll go back here. You got anything over there you want?
As for the May 30th, 2023 incident when Jennifer was charged with assault with intent to murder, the district attorney, for some unknown reason, declined to press charges in that case. We reached out to Jennifer to ask about this incident and to ask her questions about Nevaeh's case, but she has not responded to our request at this time.
We are now at St. Joseph Cemetery in Monroe. Around 1,000 people showed up to pay their final respects to Navea during the 2-day visitation for her. Around 700 people showed up for her funeral. According to her obituary, she loved to watch the movie The Jungle Book over and over again. Her grandmother Sherry said, quote, "I'd get a headache from it. I'd say, 'Okay, that's enough, Navea,' and she'd say, 'Just one more time, Grandma.' I never had any trouble with that kid. She always called me Grandma. Sometimes she'd slip up and say Mommy. I'd say that's okay. Don't worry. She was always a good baby." End quote. A local musical group called Vast Majority performed an original song they wrote for Navea. Navea loved motorcycles, and around 60 motorcycles were a part of her funeral procession. A Harley-Davidson motorcycle transferred Nevaeh's casket. Balloons were released into the air. Here at the cemetery, hundreds of people gathered as the funeral director released a white dove into the sky. Her headstone is carved into the shape of a heart. It has a motorcycle on it as well as a picture of Navea.
We've now reached the portion where we're going to discuss our own thoughts and feelings about this case. We're going to start with Heather.
Obviously, Navea was around a lot of people that she shouldn't have been around and she should have been protected. So it's really hard to know exactly who would have done it, but there's definitely one person that sticks out.
Well, I think George sticks out a lot in this particular case. They had the boy claiming the daddy George was there in the woods that day. That's what they called him. They had the fact that his motel was right there by that concrete company, and he could have purchased that 90-pound bag there. And he's obviously a sex offender. There's all kinds of issues with him. At the end of the day, what was the mother doing with these guys? And then the father had taken off and hadn't even seen her in a good long while. This is just such a sad, horrible case for this poor little girl that was being raised in this environment around these kind of people. It's also so sad that this has not been solved, despite there being a lot of really good solid suspects in this case. And now it seems that maybe it wasn't even any of them, although maybe this person knew them and therefore knew Navea through them. We just don't know. Hopefully they will charge someone with this crime at some point in time. Thanks for watching.
If you have any information about this case, please call the Monroe County Sheriff's Office at 734-240-7000.